Okay, so welcome everyone, and thank you for joining the Flywire Data Challenge Awards. For those of you who do not know, these data challenges are posted once every few months on Codex. This is our second challenge, and the third one is coming. It's in fact is already online, and I will talk about it towards the end. And the idea in these data challenges is us posing questions that we have about the connectome. Connectome is this large directed graph of neurons and synapses in the biological brain. And we get answers from folks who are good at solving problems, good at programming. Some of them are in the neuroscience, but some others are like we see here, some high school students, and we have folks from industry as well. So everyone is welcome to contribute to science through these challenges. We get the answers, and then these answers can have immediate applications. Like with the last challenge, we have used it to build this map of all the columns in the optic system of the fly. And this resource is now available on Codex as well. And I know a few projects already use this solution for their research, which is also very exciting. But then also secondary goal is for these challenges, we learn about the techniques and methods that are used to solve these combinatorial problems in large networks. And by building this toolbox of techniques, we can also apply them later on a larger connectomes that are coming online. For the participants, hopefully this is a fun way to participate and to contribute to science, to this new exciting field of connectomics, the hottest thing in neuroscience. And if you are able to get a result that is better than our benchmark that we post with the challenge, then you also secure your place on the leaderboard or on Codex. So for this challenge, we wanted to understand how feedforward the fly brain is in terms of feedback connections. And we had 8 teams and individuals who were able to beat the benchmark solution. So congratulations to all participants. Out of the 8 teams, there were 4 that were really leading the pack. They were neck and neck until the last minutes of the contest. And we decided to invite all 4 the leading teams to give short presentations. So first, yeah, the clap. Yeah, congratulations. We have the first, the winning team, Justin, Jan, and Srini from Janelia. So maybe we'll take a little photo here with the come over. As our tradition with the challenges, you also get a one-off custom trophy. This is something very unique. I like your golden medals in the Olympics. There's only one of those. Right, so congratulations.
Can we get a zoom onto the trophy?
Maybe one with the mala?
Yeah. Wait, we'll take another picture.
Okay. And then, so we'll hear a little bit longer presentation from Justin and Jan shortly. And then we have the second team, Tatsuo and Runsuan and Xin from Chinese Institute for Brain Research. Tatsuo, are you online?
Yes, indeed. I'm here.
Oh, let me make this a bit larger and maybe you can see this. Oh, hi. And congratulations to you too. Tatsuo was third place in the previous challenge, second place in this challenge. And if I understand, you are planning to be the first place in the next one. So congratulations to Tatsuo.
Thank you.
And we have the third place was Ritan, who is here in person. Do you have to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Dritana Shorva, neuropresbyterian. I started this project right at the beginning. I submitted first my results, and since then I'm hooked. And I was talking to Ari pretty much every other week. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Dritan. And this is really also encouragement for future challenges to start your submissions early. This take a while, and usually we see that the early submitters are doing well from the two challenges we had so far. Also, if you submit your solution and you explain what you did, we may have some tips or further directions sometimes to share. So this could also help. And it's just good to start early, and maybe after a couple of weeks you have another idea, you should try something else, and then make your progress. And the fourth theme that will be presented here, the most exciting for me, these are how many high school students? Two high school students mentored by Professor Bader and Dr. Du from NGIT, and they worked really hard, did a really impressive work, and at the moment they kept working after the challenge, and at the moment they hold the best result. So which is pretty impressive. And I continued chatting with Srijith after the challenge, and now Srijith is also working on some other project, which is also very exciting. So congratulations. And all right, so we'll start with the presentations. And after the presentations, we'll have a few minutes for questions or comments. And after that, I will talk briefly about the next challenge and conclude. So I want to take the stage.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Justin. This is Gary Yan. We are from the Turaga Lab at HHMI Janelia, which is in Northern Virginia. I am a PhD student, also at Johns Hopkins, advised by Srini Turaga. I also worked at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab as an engineer for a couple of years before realizing that I want to do more analysis than connectome creation.
Oh, yeah, and I work in Srini's lab as a staff scientist.
So I don't need to rehash the challenge too much, but I think it helps to look at this in mathematical terms. Just consider that we have a graph and we want an ordering of this graph. So the underlying graph is not changing under any of these orderings or any of the algorithms that me or any of the other presenters are going to talk about. But we want to understand how to essentially maximize a certain property of this graph, which is if we look at the graph in weight matrix form, trying to push as many of these weights as possible into the upper triangular of this matrix. So that if I can imagine some sensory input coming into the matrix, these are the connections that are going to receive the input at t0. And then at the next time step, everything in the lower part is the feedback is going to take all the input from the feed-forward connections and bring it back into the network. So why we want to do this in the first place, there are a few applications. The first thing is just the information flow. Ones that are going to be feed-forward are generally the synapses that are going to be in the sensory part of the brain. These are the ones most responsible for direct processing, and the ones that are in the feedback are going to be the ones maybe doing some control signaling or something more in that nature, something like attentional control, things like that. This isn't hard and fast. Again, the graph isn't changing. This is an analysis tool. Also, understanding which connections are the minimally recurrent connections may be helpful if I'm trying to do something like interpret the brain as a feed-forward network. I was speaking to somebody in Tom Griffith's lab at Princeton about trying to look at the optic lobes as some sort of inspiration for an artificial neural network. But all of our artificial neural network architectures do very badly with recurrence. So we might want to understand what's the maximally feed-forward part of the brain, the maximally feed-forward ordering, and remove the feedback in order to simplify the processing. And I think that dovetails into number 3 as well. A lot of these sorting algorithms or analysis algorithms assume no feedback because feedback really, really complicates augmented complexity. Okay, so we tried a few different techniques, and it turns out that the ones that are simpler did better. So we have a framing technique for the lecture here. Maybe I had this here, which is kind of involved in our title here, how we learn to stop worrying and love compute. And the general idea is that we tried things that are two-dimensional first, and then one-dimensional, and then we tried things that were really dumb, and things got better and better.
Right, so I'm going to do the stuff that was complex, but which didn't work. So basically, the idea was that, there's been a lot of work in discrete optimization in the past few years, and we were trying to figure out, can we use these advances in discrete optimization to tackle this problem? Specifically, we tried two different techniques, but I'm only going to talk about one in the interest of time, which is called learning latent permutations with gumball synchron networks. So essentially, what we're doing is we're taking some sort of generative approach to the problem. So basically, the idea is that we can reorder the matrix using a permutation matrix. So can we just learn to generate a permutation matrix? That's the idea. Now, generating permutation matrices isn't entirely trivial because a permutation matrix is doubly stochastic, which means that both the sum and the rows need to sum to 1. So if you generate, let's say, a random matrix like this, you'll see that it's nicely doubly stochastic. But then the harder part is actually still taking a sample from that, because taking a sample from this is not as easy as just taking the argmax over the rows or the columns, because if you do that, then you'll actually end up with an incorrect matrix. So to actually get a correct permutation matrix, sample a correct permutation matrix from this matrix of probabilities, you need to use, well, typically linear sum assignment, Hungarian algorithm, but that one's non-differential. And as we're trying to use basically a neural network to generate a permutation matrix, that's not going to go. Now, what the gumball synchron networks do is that basically they allow you to actually sample a permutation matrix from some sort of neural network. So the idea basically follows on Synchron's theorem, which is basically, we want to parameterize a doubly stochastic matrix. And then Synchron's theorem tells you that if you have an n-by-n matrix with strictly positive elements, and there exist diagonal matrices with strictly positive diagonal elements, such that D1, D2 is doubly stochastic. So basically what this just means is you take any matrix, any square matrix with positive elements, then you can generate two matrices D1 and D2 to make that whole thing doubly stochastic. Now, in practice, something is what we call the synchron knop algorithm, also known as the synchron operator, which is extremely simple, actually. So basically, you just start off with your matrix of only positive elements, and then you normalize the rows, you normalize the columns, and you keep doing that until convergence. And it turns out that this very trivial algorithm actually gets you a doubly stochastic matrix. So this gives us basically a way to start off with, if we have some sort of way to come up with a matrix of positive values, whether it be a neural network or just some other random thing. And then using the synchron operator, we can turn that into a doubly stochastic matrix. But we still need to sample from this. So basically, the idea is to use something called gumball synchron operator. So basically, we take that matrix X, which is parameterized by some neural networks. It turns out that then what we're going to do is we're going to do a gumball softmax. So basically, we add some sort of noise to that. And the noise then is a gumball distribution. We divide it by a temperature tau, which more or less sets the sharpness of the distribution. And this gives you a nice stochastic matrix. But then we still need to, this allows you to sample from a discrete matrix, but then we still need to make it a doubly stochastic matrix because it is a permutation matrix. And it turns out that basically where S is the synchron operator, so you take your matrix, your square matrix with positive elements, you add some noise to it, what you sample from your gumball matrix, from some sort of gumball noise, you divide it by some temperature, you throw it in the synchron operator, and your output is a perfect permutation matrix. That's at least the theory. So basically, if you do that, the idea is the following, right? You take the connectome, you put that into some sort of graph embedding, whatever kind of method you want to use. Then, that graph embedding is going to give you a positive, an n-by-n matrix with only positive elements. And then using the, not Dumble, but Gumball softmax, you're going to get a very beautiful permutation matrix out. You apply the permutation matrix, and you multiply it, and boom, you win the challenge. That's not true. The main issue is that this actually works, but it works at small scales only, because the synchron operator, so the thing you use to make a doubly stochastic matrix, the number of iterations you need to actually get a very nice permutation matrix out scales very, not linear, I think stronger than linear. So it takes an extremely long time to calculate this matrix. So we tried this on about 1024 by 1024 elements, which still worked. But scaling this up to connectome level stuff just didn't really work. And if you look in the
S there, the sync point operator or the softmax?
sync point,
So where's the softmax?
it's not actually a softmax. It's very similar to a softmax, right? Because you or did I make a mistake here? Let's see.
You're thinking about that.
Yes, it's very similar.
But doesn't sync point iteration behave weird when you have zeros in the matrix?
No, well, not that I could
You
tell.
can't necessarily normalize.
Well, if the whole
Yeah,
column, yeah,
right.
that's an edge case, which we didn't run into, right?
Okay.
But it is possible. So the thing is, we started late. So we did this very quickly. So there's a bunch of things in here. Because for example, I used the easiest sync point operator, right? Which is normalizing rows and columns on and on. There's plenty of stuff you can do there to speed it up and to get better convergence. And it might actually work better than or scale better, but we just did not have the time to scale this up.
Is there any guarantee how many iterations it takes?
I haven't seen a convergence rate for this sync point operator. And the paper where they introduced this stuff, so they show that this operator does go to the actual, if tau goes to 0, you actually get back a doubly stochastic matrix or a sample from a doubly stochastic matrix. But I don't know but the example they show is by 4 by 4, 5 by 5 elements, very little, right? Nothing on the order of 1,000 by 1,000 or even more. But there is some work on accelerating the sync point operator. So it might actually work that, but
this approach failed because of scale.
Yeah.
mostly, yeah. Like if you do this on 10 by 10, 20 by 20, you actually get really nice results, and I think it's very cool. But once you go beyond that, it doesn't really work. And then again, also because again, we took a very straightforward trivial approach here, but your permutation matrix is super sparse. And again, if you want to scale to connectome stuff, like just doing this with the sparse stuff, it's not going to work, right? We don't just connect them for that. Pretty sure we can think of something. We tried another method using differentiable ranking and differentiable sorting, which I'm not showing here. So basically, it turns out that you get a distance for every, you can actually get a score for each rank, and then you sort that. It turns out you can actually differentiate that. But we also had issues running that at scale, like running that to the number of nodes on a connectome. So again, there might be some solutions for this, but we didn't have the time to work this out. And then Justin's approach was actually giving us pretty decent results, so we figured we'd go on with that.
All right. So talk about things that did work. I think the failing of the previous method was scale and its dimensionality. And doing things in 2 dimensions on a connectome size structure is just really difficult. And Harinarayan comes from physics and optics, and when we were kind of talking, and when he said, "Oh, the approach is working with synthetic data." So the idea here is we need some continuous. If we want to do this discretely, we can't sort it differentiably. So we need some way to differentiably perform this embedding. So what we do is just sample from a uniform distribution for every single node in the network. So at the bottom left is what that looks like there. And what we want to do is say, well, if I'm in the upper triangular of the matrix, the embedding of my V, my column, is going to be greater than the embedding of my row, U here. And that's all I need to do. If I take the embedding post minus embedding pre, I just want to make sure that's in the upper part of the matrix, and I'm good. And then I can take derivatives. And the thing here is now I need an activation function. I need to make this nonlinear in some way.
Can we get the screen shared again? We're only seeing video.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Here you go. No worries.
Thank you.
Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm taking the source embedding and the target embedding, and I'm just applying this to a sigmoidal activation function. That way I have a gradient, which is pushing things from being in the lower triangular of the matrix into the upper triangular. And this works really, really fast. The other thing I want to mention here is the use of JAX. And this, I think, is actually the secret hero of all of our solutions here, which is a Python-based library that does some magic that is I think out of the scope of this presentation here, which makes things very, very fast by applying some more typing constraints and things like that to normal Python. So when you put this on a GPU, I don't know, 20 to 30 times speed up over PyTorch is what we were seeing in an approach like this, which is very easy. All right, so you can see what the embeddings look like with just the uniform distribution on the bottom left, and in the middle here, you can see that a lot of these embeddings get pushed right over zero. So this is in the upper triangular of the matrix, and these are the ones that are leaving that are still kind of missing us. So then we're trying to figure out how to do this further, because the output we're going to get here is completely dependent on whatever our activation function is. And we're trying to figure out ways to squeeze more and more over to the right. And there were some approaches from the original paper that said, okay, well, maybe I want to have, I think what was called a poly term in the paper. I want to make sure that all of our embeddings are within some distance so they aren't clobbering each other. We got a little bit out of that. But to try to push this as far as I could on a 150,000 neuron matrix, I tried to make the gradients as rich as possible on the part we actually cared about, which is the parts that are in the upper triangular. So we tried putting like a ReLU activation function on it so that we're not trying to penalize things that are already over zero, which was in the bottom left. We tried having some hybrid activation functions here. And this became more of an art than a science. It became a little bit of a hyperparameter search. So at this point, we were doing pretty well, but we were still in between second and third place, depending on the day. So really, we wanted to say, okay, how can we really, really squeeze some more out of this? And this is the sad part, which is that we want to do something really dumb. We just want to take random edges and just swap them. And if it's better, if it improves the result, keep it, call it a day. So this is it. We started from our best approach from the Force paper, which was already very close, within 1% of what eventually became our final solution. But in all of these coding challenges, that final 0.5% is really where all the money is. So we're trying to get as much as possible out of this. And all we did was, again, code this in JAX, which is a little bit non-trivial. But the algorithm is really, really easy. Just take I, take J, swap them, and if it improves the result, accept it. And this on JAX and on an H100 is still increasing if I continue to run it, but at, of course, increasingly slow rate. So this works. And starting from 50% got us to where the seriation method got us in one day, where that approach got us in like 5 minutes. So based on our approach, what we would recommend is that if you need something quick, or you need something that's something very large, to use the continuous differentiable approach. And if you want to squeeze as much juice out of it as possible, to do some Monte Carlo random swap. Okay, and we wanted to tie this into some literature that Gary Young cited here.
So there's a very famous paper from 2019 by Rich Sutton, who did a lot of reinforcement learning, which is called The Bitter Lesson. It's highly worth the read. I'm just going to reiterate it here a little bit. So basically says the bitter lesson is based on the historical observations that AI researchers have often tried to build knowledge into their agents. Look at all the AI from the 80s and the 90s. This always helps in the short term, and it's great to use a researcher because you came up with something smart and it works. But in the long run, it plateaus and inhibits further progress. And breakthrough progress actually comes by just scaling computation based on search and learning, right? So simple algorithms which take advantage of the hardware you have, get somewhere further. And I think this is an excellent example because we started with some very smart, hey, we can do this differentiably stuff, and in the end, taking this the most simple Monte Carlo algorithm, and I'm not sure you can even find a simpler algorithm than just swapping and seeing if it does better or not. Does better than this thing to get where you are. So to me, this is really a nice example of a bitter lesson, because I think if we wouldn't have had these these good GPUs and other stuff where this stuff takes weeks instead of a few hours to a day, it doesn't really work. So it's a nice example, but it also makes me a bit sad because all of this beautiful theoretical work, where you think, oh, this is great, this is beautiful, this is nice and elegant, it just gets beaten by doing something very straightforward, which is a little bit sad, but I think a nice example of the bitter lesson.
All right, so we have a few minutes for
Why is so bitter?
because our intuition is at risk here.
It's not bitter for NVIDIA.
Sweet lesson.
Sweet lesson. I have a question.
Please.
So, in this challenge, there were no constraints placed on which neurons were receiving, were at the start, which ones were the sensory receptors. But since you do know which nodes, maybe you could know which ones are sensory receptors, does it actually come up with a solution that's reasonable, like biologically reasonable?
We wanted to check this. I don't think.
Yeah.
the time.
I mean, in the original graph embedding approach, we're thinking, let's put as many attributes as we can on these graph embeddings. Let's put the type, let's put a hemisphere, let's put the instance, the geographic region of the synapses. But I think that kind of goes into the bitter lessons. Well, we could try that, but the simple solution does really well. But I think this maybe kind of goes into the baseline solution. Like the feedback arc method is kind of pushing the sensory areas over here. I don't know how well you would do if you try to sort just on the type data. That's an interesting question.
In
No,
fact,
I'm just asking if you have, now that you have your optimal.
Is it biologically similar to the
well,
biology?
I've checked. Let me report quickly. So I checked the top solutions, and in all of them, one thing that's clear is that the huge inhibitory neurons are the ones with the most feedback. Most of the feedback is concentrated there, but it's not as clear for the sensory part. So there were like the top 3 solutions that I checked. In all of them, these huge inhibitory neurons are the ones that are holding most of the feedback. So it still makes sense biologically.
Yeah. And it's intuitive that anything that has out degree and no in degree should always be in the feedforward section.
I have a question too. I actually do like the same thing in my PhD, but I was analyzing the initial PBD body, swapping I and J. And my impression at the time was even for tens of thousands of size of matrices, it was pretty fast on a single laptop if I parallelize it a little bit. So I'm curious, what's the part of JAX that improve the simplest?
Well, the JAX while loops decompose into GPUs really, really nicely. So do you want to speak more about this, carry on?
I mean, it depends on how you do it, right? Because if you do it in Python, then no, there's 2 components here. JAX, B, GPUs, because it's big matrices. So if you want to calculate that score of your new matrix, right? Having everything as a big matrix on a GPU helps. So that's part A. Part B is that JAX is compiled and not interpreted. So again, if you just write your own CUDA, you might be able to get as far. But PyTorch will not get you as far because in the end, this is compiled into one big GPU program, and it runs and doesn't even communicate with your main computer until it finishes. So that gets you quite a lot. And there's actually there's very active community in JAX using much more advanced statistical methods, which actually run on GPUs now. And it turns out that this is actually a great idea.
My impression is that the mushroom body is somewhere where the anatomy would get you most of the way, though. It's like there's no way of getting around the APLs being feedback connections.
We didn't even have API at the time.
Oh, okay.
My question is that have you did such kind of test? First, your method start from initial result, no randomly. Another is start from some very good result. If your method run at the same time, they will get the same goal or very different.
I see. So for the continuous approach, it seemed like where you started from saturated to about the same point. But for the Monte Carlo methods, it just keeps increasing. Like after I saw that David's group was beating us this morning, I just restarted the job on the GPU and it's going up. Okay, great.
We actually only came up with this because we had a decent, we didn't expect it to actually get any far with the brute force, but we only started it after we sort of plateaued and we figured, well, if we're close, should we just give it a shot to refine it? And then it turns out that you can even do the whole thing if you have a bit more patience.
Yeah, and this is kind of the blessing and the curse of how Ari structured the problem without showing us how good everybody was doing over time. It's like, I know how close everybody is. Let's try to squeeze as much as we can.
Yeah, I just don't want to discourage anyone from submitting early. And because once you have a score, then okay, I just need to do a little bit more than that.
Yeah, it's like when you cross the 4-minute mile, all of a sudden everybody can do it.
So do you have any intuition how close we all are to the optimal solution?
I don't know, things are slowing down. And I know that Ari put like some heuristic that he's going to talk about later on top of our scale a little bit more. And that was all that showed up on Friday. So I was like, okay, let's run it a little bit more. But that was 0.001% better than ours. Yeah. Right now, your guys' best approach is like 0.002% better than ours. So I was like,
slightly different.
Yeah.
Because also, for example, this was the simplest Monte Carlo, right? Where we only look for a switch between two.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can
yeah.
also think of motives where you need to switch three elements or
Yeah,
four
yeah,
elements, or higher order stuff, which
But do
we
you
haven't
think
looked
we're
at.
already at like the local maximum? Like we're not gonna escape?
I don't think so. Of course, that's my dumb human intuition, but
The only lower bound is half the amount of feedback, so
yeah,
we're still pretty far from that.
Yeah.
yeah, but it seems like multiple approaches are converging in a single.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any questions online or any comments before the next is Tatsuo actually. Any quick questions or comments online?
One more. So you said, really quick, you said the continuous approach match, or sorry, the brute force approach matched what the continuous approach got in 5 minutes over the course of a day.
Yeah, big asterisk for wall time and the GPU and
okay, yeah. So I guess could you use the continuous approach? That actually to me kind of really recommends the continuous approach that match like a day of H100 like in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So you could versus use the continuous approach to get the initial conditions for the brute force.
exactly. I think that's it. Yeah, but if I use the continuous approach again on the Monte Carlo result, it goes back.
Cool.
But again, big credit for the continuous approach that you get within 1%.
Okay, thanks. And next presentation by Tatsuo is going to be a little bit shorter presentation. And anyone knows on PowerPoint how to do presentation mode?
Slideshow.
Oh, yeah, it's in the lower right, there's a little screen, tiny little screen on the bottom.
That one, yes. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, should I get started?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm Tatsuo Kubo, and I'd be happy to share our solutions for this challenge. So this is the work that I did with Runxuan and Zhenxing in my group. And all our code will be available at this GitHub repo if anybody's interested in the detail. Okay. So our approach was pretty simple and start from the benchmark solution as the starting point and try to improve it little by little. So the obvious question here is how to improve a given solution and then what to do if we reach a local maxima. So I'll try to answer these in my presentation. Okay, so how to improve a given solution? So let's say we have an initial solution that looks like this, a little bit simplified. We try to improve the solution one node at a time. So in this example, let's just take node V5 and then try to see if we can insert this somewhere to improve the overall score. And note that we actually don't have to go and search for every possible locations in the solution, but instead we only have to consider the location with respect to the nodes that are actually connected with this node. So in other words, we actually constructed a subgraph with all the nodes that are directly connected to this node of interest V5. And because the connectome is pretty sparse, this actually kind of limits the search space quite a bit. Okay, and then now we have this node V5, and we want to calculate the improvement in the score when we insert it into different locations. And note that we only have to calculate the difference in the score instead of the actual score itself, which will require the entire nodes. Okay, so we basically want to fill out the table that's shown below. So let's just see a very simple example. Let's say this is the solution before we do the insertion. And in this case, the score is sum of feed-forward weights, 4 plus 7 equals 11. And then let's take this node and bring it over here. And now the feed-forward score becomes 15 plus 7, 22. So that would lead to an improvement of score of 11. So we fill that table there. And then if we insert the V5 into the next location, we will lose this feed-forward connection 4. So that will be a loss of score 4 minus 4. And similar thing with the very last location. So once we fill this table, now we know that the best location for this node V5 will be right before V1. So we go ahead and actually perform this insertion. Okay. And then for this, we actually used a nice trick from this paper that instead of actually trying out this different insertion location from the beginning to the end, we actually instead use a sequential swap, because any insertion operation can be implemented by sequential swap. And we also need this intermediate step anyway. So that led to a little bit more efficient. So this is a local search algorithm. So it's very easy to get stuck in local maxima. So the next question is, what do we do once we reach a local maxima? So we did a pretty simple iterated local search. So we keep on doing the local search until we reach a local maximum. Once we reach a local maximum, we add perturbation to this solution. In our case, the perturbation was just random interchange of nodes. And exactly what fraction of nodes we interchanged was kind of an important hyperparameter that we had to manually tune. But roughly speaking, at the beginning, we employed a fairly large perturbation of roughly 50%. But towards the end, we used a fairly small perturbation of 0.5% or so. So we basically kept on doing this. And we added a little bit of twist to this iterated local search. We used a population-based iterated local search. That is, we kept on doing local search until the score stops improving, then perturb it, but perturb it in multiple different ways, and then use those as a starting seed for the local search. And then at the end of it, just take the best solution and then use that as the seed for the next step, and iterating this over and over. And in our case, we typically ran 15 to 20 parallel searches. And we just kept on doing this process until the deadline of the challenge. Okay, so just to summarize our approach, we used local search based on node insertion to keep on improving the results. And once we hit local maxima, we used population-based iterated local search. So for our implementation, we implemented this algorithm in Python and NumPy, and we just used CPUs, but kept on running for about 3 weeks or so. Our final score was 84.4%. And again, our solution and the code is available at this GitHub if anybody's interested. And at the end, I would like to thank Dr. Malamurthy, Dr. Sebastian Sun, and Ari, and the entire Flywire team for this opportunity. Thanks a lot.
So do you try to apply this method to the winning solution on top?
A good question. We haven't yet. We haven't done it yet, yeah.
Yeah, most likely it will improve them a little.
Good point. Good point. Yes.
I think pretty much anyone can apply their own solution on the other top solution.
Exactly. Yeah. Combining multiple different approaches will be, because ours were pretty saturating towards the end. So yeah, at 84.4, and it would have been a little bit difficult to reach 85 even if we continued further. So yes, combining ideas from others, or starting from solution of others would have been a good thing to try. Yes, thanks.
Any questions for Tatsu?
How many steps do you typically, how far away is your insertion typically? How many sequential swaps do you need to do before you get it to where it needs to be?
Yeah, let's see. That's a great question. And I only remember the actual physical time that it took. We would take, so what we did was pick a random node and do the insertion and do the local search. And then it would, let's see, saturate in about 3 to 5 hours physical time. I forgot the exact steps. But that, so we actually had to keep on adding this perturbation fairly frequently, which we wished we automated, but we kind of tune this perturbation parameter and then add this perturbation kind of manually. So it was fairly frequent local search perturbation cycle that we had to kind of babysit.
I have a question. Have you did this kind of experiments? You said you just add the node randomly, select one node and find its optimal position. If you not select your node randomly, just let the node, for example, from 0 to n minus y, this will give you a better efficiency, or it's such kind of
Yes, so that's a good question. And we experimented with both, and I was a little bit inaccurate. In the end, what we did was like pseudo-random. So at the very beginning of an epoch, it's a little bit like deep learning, where we have a random order and then go through node one at a time. So that, you know, if it were to select nodes completely randomly, towards the end, it would have been pretty tough because maybe most of the nodes that we pick might not lead to any improvements. So we actually used pseudo-random and then went through one at a time. And then once we finished all the nodes, that will be one epoch. And then when going to the next epoch, we will shuffle the order. Yes, but I think how to choose the random actually will be kind of an important thing. So thanks for pointing that out.
Okay, that makes sense.
I guess you can also just pick the nodes that have any feedback, right? The nodes without feedback, there's no point optimizing them.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Okay, if there are no more questions for Tatsu, we'll move to Dritan. Share the screen.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Dritan Ashorba, data architect at the New York Presbyterian Hospital. My presentation, I guess, will be very similar to the previous one, maybe a little bit of you guys. Using a simulated annealing, which is a method, very similar method of Monte Carlo, swapping cells around with a slightly different algorithm. Let's see. How do I change the slide here? Is this a PDF or?
Yeah.
No, okay, I got it. All right, so small introduction about simulated annealing. So what is it? It is inspired from the annealing process of metal. So think about, metal, you heat it up and then you cool it down very slowly. And the hope is that the particles or small crystals inside will form in a more regular shape than, cooling it down quickly. So we're trying here to minimize the entropy of the system and make things fall where they're supposed to be. So what we do is we start with a high temperature, as we can see, like with a maximum temperature, and then eventually the point of the whole simulation is to drop down to 0. And the whole process might take 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So it's a slow process. It's not going to be quick. And while the temperature falls to 0, we swap cell positions and we calculate the feedback, the forward feedback, feedforward score. So gradually we decrease the temperature to 0, at which point the simulation will end. While simulating, we will randomly pick 2 cells and try to swap their position. Now, if the swap results in a higher score, we keep the swap. So that means it's a good swap. It improved the score, so it's so far so good. But if the swap results in a lower score, then we have to make a decision. Sometimes we do keep it and sometimes we discard it. And that actually depends on the temperature. So when the temperature is high in the beginning, we are very tolerant. We will also keep bad swaps. But later during the process, we will be stricter and stricter, and we will try to eliminate them. And yeah, we continue swapping until the temperature goes to 0. So why don't we just swap cells till the solution is found, or why do we need this temperature gradient? And this is similar to the explanation of the previous team. you're gonna get stuck into a local max, into a local maxima. So your score will improve to some point, but then you're not going to accept any other score that is less than what you have. So basically, you're going to get stuck at point A, let's say, in this graph. The point is to travel, let's say, from A to B to C to D to E, and then during your travel, just remember what was the highest score you have achieved so far. So it's very important not to get stuck in the very beginning. And unfortunately, I guess for all of us, at some point, I mean, we're all going to get stuck at some point before hitting the global maxima, let's say, which in this case is C. But it's important not to get stuck on the first one, at least. These are my simulation results. So I got the third place with 35,364,447. Simulation time took about 35 days. You probably need 1 day to go down to 35 million and I don't know, 250,000, but the last 100,000 will take a time. The simulation work was run into a desktop computer, Core i7, lowercase I, sorry about that, 12th generation. I started the temperature with 2,500 degrees. Doesn't mean anything, but in my opinion, I should have gone a little bit lower. I mean, most likely 60 would have been the right choice, but this is like once you start the simulation, it's very hard to go back. Number of swaps, 120 billion. So during this time, I logged about 120 billion random pair swaps in order to come up with a solution. It was written in C#. I did not hit the local maxima, so if I would let it run longer, the score would increase, but the return of investment, started to go down. So pretty much you spend a day for like 1,000 points, which kind of becomes not economic anymore. This is a graph that shows the score, which is the forward score, which is the orange line, and in blue it is the temperature, which goes from 2,500 0. And the whole graph, I mean, the horizontal axis represents time, which in this case it's about 25 days. So there are 10 days that back. I rerun the last 2 degrees. But it's not shown in this one, but it doesn't matter because the score is pretty much the same as what I achieved.
So it might be,
yeah.
In addition to temperature, it might be good to just graph the rejection rate.
The rejection rate, yeah, okay.
So how often? Because that's temperature and the scale of the change is not necessarily. It's not what temperature means, unless you know the scale.
Okay, good point. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
I'm just curious what kind of rejection rate you see after.
Yeah, I have to do the exponential function. Yeah, didn't think about that, but yeah, makes sense.
Did you consider other patterns of temperature where you back up again?
Yes, yes, I do that, and it does help a lot, but it will not get you. It might get you a part of a percent. It's very hard to get. Once you get 84, it's very hard to go 85 and above. So what I did is I went all the way to 0, and then I rolled it back, and then I went to 0 again, and that does help a lot. It reduces the stress, I guess, in between the nodes. Now, yeah, quickly, some pros and cons. This is just my opinion in general, but in this particular case, you don't need to know how to solve the problem, so you just have to model it. So you have to be good at modeling the problem and let time and the CPU find a solution for you. It's a reusable code. It can be used in many of these NP-hard problems. It might improve the solution, especially if your solution is generated by other algorithms. So it can be used as a post-processing step. And less prone to biases is pretty much what the first team said about the bitter truth. I didn't want to introduce any knowledge to the algorithm that didn't come from from simple math, or in this particular case, it's just a random rearrangement of cells. So I'm not telling to the algorithm anything that I personally know. I'm letting it discover it for me. So cons, of course, it takes a long time to run. So
Was it multi-core?
it was multi-core, so I don't go too much in detail here, but I had 14 threads running in parallel in the beginning, and then I picked one that gave me the best score, and I developed it even more. So that's how I started initially, yes. But in this, I'm not showing the part because it's discarded pretty much. So yeah, if your input data in this sense, like if the graph changes frequently, you cannot use it because it's not feasible. It takes too long time. It's not that deterministic. It means every time you run it, you get a different result. So sometimes you're lucky, you might get a good score. Sometimes you're not. So temperature and cooling rate are also a problem. So what temperature should you choose? How much should you cool the system at what rate? Those are all parameters that make a lot of difference, but are very hard to to guess or to know before you run the experiment. And it might not get you the winning score. So it's good if you can provide something more other than random swaps. My last slide has to do with the first team as well. So you can use it as a post-processing step. So I downloaded the solutions from the first team, put it at a temperature of 0.5, let it run for about 30 hours, and it increased the score by 16,000. But I guess the first team is also using similar Monte Carlo methods, so they just gave up at some point, I guess, and say, no point, right? Yeah. So that's all. Anybody has any questions?
But I think you guys claimed that zero temperature.
Yeah, I tried to simulate it annealing, and again, after 84.45%, I think zero temperature works best.
Zero
No, but
temperature
even
works best.
starting from 50%.
Yeah.
Zero temperature gets you there.
It gets you there. I just think being able to do it faster on GPU, maybe what appears like a local maxima, you really just need to find the breakout at some point.
So they're claiming there is no loophole.
Oh no, there is, because that was the first score that I submitted to Ari, and that did actually get stuck way before.
I don't know. To me, it feels like we didn't run into local
And
maximum.
that's when I switched to.
But there's a conflict between.
There is, I don't know, but that's.
I mean, it's a very, like the space, I think what we're calling local minima are just like, it's
a matter of luck, probably.
Yeah. I think it's luck at some point in how many of these swaps you can do.
Yeah.
But it's not that you have these big changes like here on this.
But I really wish I didn't have to do the simulated annealing, because if you do temperature 0 in the beginning all the time, you can see your score increasing, which is great. But when you do simulated annealing, you see your score rising very slowly, and you cannot tell if you're wasting your time or if you are.
Right. What they're describing sounds more like a satellite. It's slowing down. It might be slowing down, but it's not really slowing.
Well, yeah. I mean, I didn't have the same experience. No, maybe I hit a local maximum.
Yeah, I think this is a question of how many steps you can do in a given amount of time, right? Because to me, intuitively, there's so many nodes in the problem saying that there is not a single node, not a single swap operation I can do in that entire
It's
size.
hard to verify whether you're at a level.
Yeah.
Possible then, yeah. So I could do probably like 1 million swaps in 13 seconds, so in one thread. So that's.
I have a question about
Yes.
the details of your simulated annealing. You randomly select your method. You randomly select 2 vertex as the next solution based on the current solution or based on the current best solution. How you generate the next step?
Totally random. There is no state. You just pick
your
a new
next
pair.
solution is not based on the current best, just based on the current solution you get.
You just swap. So the next has nothing to do with the current history.
Yeah, I know. Use randomly select 2 vertices. My question is, when you randomly select 2 vertices, when you calculate the score, you should base it on condition or
The whole
reasonable
configuration.
Yeah, it's based on the current best solution you have get, or based on solution of the, formulated analysis you have.
Yeah.
The current state,
The current,
next
the
state.
current, not the best.
So not based on best.
No, if you base it on the best, that's something I also tried. It will give you a very nice, gain in the score, but then you will have a worse score than you can have by not doing that.
Okay.
It gives you the illusion that you're doing a good thing, but you're not. So don't use the best score for anything other than documenting what your best score.
You just remember.
Yeah, just remember, but do not use it for anything else. That will get you in a lower total score rather than just keep changing what you have. Yes, sir.
Oh, just curious, how did you efficiently calculate the delta after each swap?
Similar, I believe, to the team before me. You don't have to calculate the score for all the cells. I mean, this is a sparse matrix. You're going to swap two cells, so pretty much everything that is affected is the nodes that talk to the first cell, the nodes that talk to the second cell, and if they maybe the first cell and the second cell talk with each other. So it's a small subset of cells that are affected. So you only look at those small changes, and that's how you get a quick evaluation of the forward score without calculating from beginning to an end. I mean, you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
It takes forever.
I think it also helps that it's degree bounded. Like the max degree is around 100, like 1,000, I think.
Yeah, average on 200.
The average is around 200, so I think that helps a lot.
Definitely.
Thank you. And we have one last but not least presentation. How get that email?
Is the right one?
Yes. Good.
Oh.
I'm Hari, student at Edison Mining School, NJ.
I'm Srijith. I'm also a student at Edison Academy Mining School, and Dr. Du from the Principal Research Scientist at NJIT. And we would also like to thank the NSF for supporting our work. Okay, so here's a quick summary of our approaches. We utilize simulated annealing with a novel method called Topo shuffling, which is a technique to introduce entropy into the system without reducing the solution quality. We also use integer programming with the Gurobi optimizer, and our contest solution score was 35,231,406. And we've also, after the contest ended, we've gotten a score of 35,459,209.
It's actually 212.
And this is the best score to date.
Okay, so our main approach initially is parallelized annealing. I think Mr. Sriram covered this already, but essentially, simulated annealing works where you have this thing called the energy, trying to minimize that by doing moves. In our case, the energy was the negative of the sum of the forward edge weights, the same as the backward edge weights, mathematically not a big difference. And to move, we did the same thing as Mr. Sharva, which is we swapped two nodes. And like you mentioned, it is very efficient to calculate it because it's just the images, images, and then mass fast for that, right? So then we parallelize this approach by essentially running it like each on a thread for like some number of iterations. In our case, it was like 1 million to 10 million, depending on how fast we were in this going, and then sort of like joined them to a solution, and then kept doing that again and again for several weeks. And I use Golang because it's really fast, and parallelization is really, really easy.
This is a high school student.
Relatively easy, right?
Yeah.
This is the graph that they observed initially from from random to I guess it's 100 million iterations. So as you can see, it is proportional to like 1/x. So as you get further and further into the process, it goes like really, really slowly. And to sort of fix that, we have an approach that he'll talk later. But yeah, this is how it looks like initially. But after about 35.2 million, it was it was absurdly slow. Next slide.
At what score does it saturate?
This approach saturates at that score basically. After that, it takes like a few billion to get like 10 or 20. It's really slow.
So the main issue with simulated annealing and also these single swap methods, they can only affect 2 nodes at a time. And the thing is, we want to be able to introduce variability into the system while still preserving all the edges we got so far. And as many of you are familiar with topological sorting, it's essentially just use a queue and then take the current in-degree node 0 nodes and just append them to the current ordering. The thing is, we can actually improve the variability of this even further by taking a random node from the queue instead of just the first node. And we can do this with simple swap and pop operations. And I was actually like in school when I was implementing this, like during a class. I was like, right? Like at that time, we were only took like 10 billion iterations to get like improvements of like 5. And then suddenly, like after I hit run, it like got an improvement of like 20K in like 1 minute. I was like is my evaluation wrong or something? And then I sent it over to Hari and he confirmed, and like we're actually super surprised that such a simple method like this actually worked.
You're always picking a node within degree 0?
Yeah, because that preserves the constraint that we keep all the current nodes, like all the current edges.
So one from the queue and then another random one, or?
No, basically like we have a set of all in degree 0 nodes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Technically, when you select an in degree 0 node at the start, it doesn't matter which one you choose, right? Because it's not connected to anything before.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we keep doing this, at any time we just add in the new in degree 0 nodes, and if we select the random one from it, it preserves the condition of all the previous edges being satisfied as well. And yeah, just for context, the score delta rates increased about 1,000-fold compared to the previous parallelized simulated annealing, this score regime. And this is just a quick graph. Like the orange is like our score, like without topple shuffle, and then like the blue is where the first use of topple shuffle. And as you can see, the score deltas increased a lot.
But eventually, even this did saturate to some degree. So then we used integer programming. So essentially, I think most of you are familiar with how it works. And we used this, and by doing it through a different method, just helped combat the rate degradation we got with just using simulated annealing and similar methods. So by doing this, we were able to get even further deltas. And we used Groby because it's really, really fast and that makes life easier. And we used the memory efficient formulation, and that gives us just memory instead of more, making it even faster. And then so we used warm starting. So we started it, so it's sort of like it's initialized with the solution from simulated annealing. We run that for a couple of days, take that, put it in simulated annealing, and sort of go back and forth. And that helps us like get out of local minima and simulated annealing, and that helps us graph even faster. That gave us a final solution of 35,231,406.
So the integer programming is used to improve or just to get another solution with similar.
Well, sort of. So initially we used it to get a whole new solution, proved from there from using simulating with topological. That was a huge improvement. And then sort of like went back and forth. So like, yeah, so go.
And so for an overall summary of our compute, we did around a few trillion parallel iterations of simulated annealing, accounting for all the cores, and 1 week plus of integer programming compute. And here are some graphs. This is a timeline of our overall progress. So first, around like beginning of August, we did like the vanilla simulated annealing. Then we actually came up with like a niche method, which actually connects into the bidder lesson, subset greedy, which is essentially like it's kind of like a lot more complex than just singular swap. You select k things and then try finding the optimal configuration of just those k nodes. And we found that actually plateaued and did worse than vanilla simulated annealing, which is why we decided to just go with the simpler simulated annealing, which is consistent with the bitter lesson. And then after that, we did the parallel simulated annealing, which is relatively trivial to do with Go. And after that, we started like seeing a lot more like convergence, and then we started a topple shuffle, which it does look small. It looks like a small impact at that range, but we're talking about like fractions of percents here, so it doesn't look that big from this range. And after that, finally, we started using IP parallel with all those. And this is like the scaled up version of the topological shuffling effect. You can see that it's plateauing right before we use topple shuffle. Then right after we use it, like while I was in class that day, like it's like a huge improvement, about 1,000-fold improvement of delta compared to before.
You're skipping school to be here today, right?
Yeah. I'm definitely sick.
Versus the blue curve. The orange curve is more like the winning solution. They just applied more GPUs and so could push up.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think at that scale, it's just more about the GPU offering so much more power, and it was able to surpass that local minimum times.
Is that? No, that's a different slides. Oh no. Okay. Okay, so to conclude, we presented our two approaches, parallel annealing with Java shuffling and entry programming to approach this problem. And so the Java shuffle algorithm uses annealing to sort of like, well, increases the entropy force within annealing, and that makes it go a lot faster. And we also plan to look into more methods of sort of like alternate encodings of the problem, because as we observed with IP, with simulating, and even with Justin's method, turns out if you use like multiple methods that sort of have different local loss landscapes, you can get like really fast improvements by using different methods. So that's pretty interesting, and we hope to explore that further. Thank you.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Additional questions? Someone online, maybe?
So how long does it take to run your, if you start from scratch again, how long does it take to get to the best score?
The best score, well, that depends. I mean, we haven't tried it, but to get really close, like 84 can get like a day. It's not hard to. 84, 85 is insane. Yeah. Like it takes like that was like the first like week we got to like 84, and then the rest of the time is spent getting from 84 to 85. But yeah, it takes a really long time because the 1/x curve is not ideal.
So our future is in good hands. That's good. Thanks. And the next challenge is available on Codex. Please check it out. And if you plan to participate, start early. That's pretty much the only advice. I guess if you had more time, you would probably beat the winning pick. So starting early is the
Or skipping more school.
We can conclude the Zoom live stream, but then maybe we can have some photos with the participants.
Yes, Sebastian is here.
Any final comments from Zoom? All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining.